On January the 7th of 2023, a 2012 Volkswagen was observed driving erratically and hitting the guardrail on the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey. The driver, 21-year-old Lexi Lorino, failed to stop after the collision and was pursued by Officer Carlos Gonzalez of the Roselle Police Department, who was off duty at the time. He stopped Lorino at an intersection and alerted dispatch. The investigation was picked up by his colleagues from the Long Branch Police Department in the neighboring town. Lorino denied that a collision had occurred, but Officer Kyle Kampf noted that there was damage to the front passenger side of her vehicle. He decided to conduct a field sobriety test after noticing an odor of alcohol emanating from Lorino. She struggled to maintain her balance during the walk and turn test, as well as during the one-leg stand test, at one point sheepishly telling an officer that she was sorry because she messed up. Lorino also had trouble keeping her head in place while following Kampf's pen during the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, as shown in footage captured by the officer's body cam. Kampf eventually arrested her for driving while intoxicated. Back at the station, Lorino called her father to come pick her up, saying, "I did not get arrested. Well, I kind of did." Presumably after the man had asked what for, Lorino claimed that it was technically for driving while intoxicated. Lorino was eventually released to her father, who arrived at the station and upon learning she'd been involved in an accident told her, "You're lucky you're all right." Number 7. Hannah Ayub. In March of 2021, law enforcement in Greenacre, southwest Sydney, Australia, saw a driver run a red light and overtake a vehicle on unbroken lines on Waterloo Road. They signaled the vehicle to pull over, but the woman behind the wheel, 25-year-old Hannah Ayub, kept driving. She ran a stop sign before she was eventually brought to a halt by heavy traffic on Roberts Road, where the pursuing officers caught up with her. As an officer was handcuffing her, a belligerent Ayub said that she was on her way to get tested for coronavirus because her brother was positive. Not long after that reveal, she turned her head and spat in the officer's face. As captured on cell phone video, the cop warned her, "Do not spit on me or I will put you on the ground." Seconds later, Ayub spat at the cop once more and was tackled to the ground. The woman screamed and told the officer, "I can't wait to sue you, you dog." The cop was forced to threaten one of Ayub's relatives with pepper spray as they tried to intervene in the arrest. After fitting her with a face mask, 3 officers wrestled Ayub into the back of an official vehicle as she shouted at them, "You dogs!" The woman was charged with dangerous driving, speeding by more than 45 kilometers per hour, driving while disqualified, and assaulting a police officer. Number 6. Starbucks outburst. Footage posted to X of an incident at a Starbucks which occurred on January the 1st of 2024, somewhere in the US, rose to over 10 million views in just 4 days. The clip showed a tall blonde woman as she was in the process of arguing with a barista, repeatedly telling the latter that she wasn't listening. The exasperated employee eventually replied to the woman that she wouldn't be taking her order and walked away. In the moments that followed, the blonde woman, who had an orange handbag draped over her forearm, pointed and swore at the employee. She then started tearing apart the counter display while repeatedly moaning, "Come on!" Other baristas stopped what they were doing and watched her, awestruck, as she threw numerous items on the floor before storming towards the exit. The Starbucks customer who posted the video to X aptly captioned it, "Why are people like this?" Users condemned the blonde woman's behavior, writing that she was attention-starved and that she looked like a circus performer. Number 5. Dami Hope. Reality star Dami Hope came under fire in the spring of 2023 for a dangerous stunt he performed while behind the wheel of his Mercedes-Benz. The previous year, 27-year-old Hope had appeared on the reality show Love Island, where he'd finished in 3rd place alongside his girlfriend, India Pollock. As he was driving, Hope started recording the road in front of him on his cell phone. He then took his other hand off the steering wheel and placed it on the sunroof as he continued filming out the top of his car. Hope captioned the video, which he posted to his Instagram stories. Summer soon land. The reality star was heavily criticized by road safety campaigners for his behavior. John Scrubby from the Campaign Against Drink Driving told The Sun that Hope was another example of so-called celebrities thinking they are above the law. Scrubby demanded police actions and highlighted that Hope and others performing such stunts had a negative influence on young people learning to drive. The campaigner added, "And just how stupid are they to not only break the basic laws in traffic legislation, but to film themselves doing it?" It remained unclear if Hope faced any legal backlash for the video. Number 4. Sadsub Laan. Former footballer and Love Island Australia star Sadsub Laan surrendered to Sydney law enforcement in late May of 2022 after he'd been wanted in connection to a brutal assault during the opening days of the Vivid Festival in the early hours of May the 28th. Laan was involved in an altercation with an unnamed 18-year-old male while at Circular Quay. Laan, a former Penrith Panthers under-20s footballer, was reported to have struck the teenager with great force, inflicting multiple facial fractures. The victim, who wasn't known to Laan prior to the conflict, was assessed by NSW ambulance paramedics before being taken to Royal North Shore Hospital. On May the 30th, Laan went to the St. Mary's police station and was arrested for causing reckless, grievous bodily harm. Following his appearance on Love Island, Laan vanished from Instagram after he was accused by a follower of contacting her while she was a minor. Laan replied to his accuser saying, "Just so you know, honey, 16 is legal age." And he admitted that he'd talked to her but denied that he'd initiated the conversation, writing, "You hit me up and I got that screenshot." Number 3. Stephanie Bloodworth. In February of 2022, a Tesla was observed speeding on the island of Duck Key in Florida. The woman behind the wheel, 24-year-old Stephanie Bloodworth, briefly stopped her vehicle upon being signaled to do so by a deputy. In the moments that followed, she drove off, but the deputy remained in pursuit until Bloodworth pulled over again. She got out of the Tesla with the cop pointing his taser at her, but as shown in body cam footage, the young woman failed to comply with any of his instructions. She calmly asked what she was being accused of before getting back in the vehicle. The deputy rushed to her and reached inside the Tesla through the open window. In the moments that followed, Bloodworth rolled up her window and told him, "I own this island," before she sped away. Assistance from additional units was requested, and Bloodworth was eventually stopped a third time. She emerged from the Tesla while in the midst of a phone call with her dad when the deputy charged her, took her to the ground and began restraining her. Bloodworth repeatedly yelled out, "Dad!" while struggling on the ground, and kept crying out that she didn't know what she'd done wrong. While resisting, she kicked the female officer who was assisting in the arrest, but was given a stern warning. The woman continuously asked for her father, whom she claimed owned the island. Upon being told by one of the cops that she could have killed someone with her reckless driving, Bloodworth responded, "I could have killed you too, but you're alive, right?" She was being held against the vehicle when the deputy gave two female officers a rundown of what had happened. They burst into laughter when a crying Bloodworth claimed that she didn't know that the man who'd previously held her at taser point was a deputy, in spite of him repeatedly announcing himself as such. As the police officers tried placing her in the back of the cruiser, Bloodworth violently resisted them, at one point slipping out of her handcuffs. She was quickly brought under control, and her father eventually made his way to the scene. He urged Bloodworth to comply with the officer's instructions, told her that he couldn't help, and asked if she'd taken her medication. The deputy was subsequently recorded saying, "I feel bad for the dad." At the station, Bloodworth, who insisted during the arrest that she was 3 years clean, was recorded with a BAC that was roughly 3 times the legal limit. She was charged for resisting an officer, fleeing police, a DUI, and a moving traffic violation for reckless driving. Today's topic was inspired by Tom Billard 5264. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe. and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Katherine Carter's photo. In the spring of 2016, Australian woman Katherine Carter uploaded a photo to her Facebook account that showed a young woman driving recklessly while traveling along the Bruce Highway on Queensland's Sunshine Coast. While in the passenger seat of her husband's Land Cruiser, Carter snapped a photo of 2 young women who were in a car next to theirs. Neither of them was wearing a seatbelt, while the vehicle was moving at roughly 70 miles per hour. Both the passenger and the driver were glued to their cell phones, and the latter's hands were nowhere near the steering wheel, as she was basically steering with her knees. Carter described the sight as one of the most stupid and reckless things she'd ever seen. The concerned woman noted that the driver's recklessness had occurred in conditions of heavy traffic and wet roads, pointing out that they ran the risk of not only hurting themselves, but other motorists, before poignantly remarking, "It's not right." If this video fascinates you, then stay tuned till after number 1 for when affairs go wrong. We know you'll love it. Number 1. Christopher Wetmore and Joseph de Normandy. 2 male models and the daughter of a former Brooklyn prosecutor were arrested in the fall of 2014, along with a 4th accomplice, for their role in a drug operation allegedly run out of an apartment in Chelsea, New York City. Christopher Wetmore and Joseph de Normandy, aged 25 and 20 respectively, were both models working for the reputable Quest agency. Wetmore had appeared in GQ Style magazine and modeled for brands like Rockaware and Diesel. He lived with de Normandy in an apartment which law enforcement suspected doubled as a drug den. De Normandy faced charges for criminal sale of a controlled substance and conspiracy, as did Wetmore, who was taken into custody after selling LSD and $2,500 worth of cocaine to an undercover police officer. Also charged was teenager Julia Arcia, whose father was a prosecutor. She also reportedly sold cocaine and $700 worth of LSD to an undercover officer. Media outlets would describe the 2 male models as posing during their first appearance at a Manhattan court. Arcia's defense lawyer claimed that she hadn't been actively involved in drug trafficking and that she'd merely accompanied her boyfriend and co-defendant, 27-year-old Richard Figueroa, to the drug deal. She was released in the aftermath upon securing her $75,000 bond. Wetmore's mother, Staten Island resident Carol Bird, accused Arcia of being free due to her father's connections, while her son remained jailed, unable to cover his $300,000. Bird addressed Arcia directly in the media, saying, "My son has to rot because you get out because your father is a prosecutor." In September of that year, de Normandy had written on the Quest Models blog, "Young men have a huge potential to change the world and make it a better place for everyone." His bond was set at $100,000. Updates on the matter indicated that he and Wetmore had pleaded not guilty to their charges. Number 7. Eric Charles Mourn. During a traffic stop conducted in Austin, Texas in December of 2021, businessman Eric Charles Mourn was arrested and charged on multiple counts, including conspiracy to commit kidnapping, resulting in death. 46-year-old Mourn was a married man and grandson to the founder of the Mourn Automotive Group, based in Austin, a prestigious business where he was also a partner. He'd allegedly been having an affair with 33-year-old Holly Williams. Emails between them suggested they'd sometimes meet up when he visited Nashville, Tennessee, and it's believed they'd seen each other in February of 2020. Then in March, Mourn started receiving messages from 36-year-old William Lanway, a man with romantic ties to Williams, who threatened to reveal the affair lest he was paid for his silence. On March the 12th, Lanway and Williams were found dead in the former's Acura sedan at a Nashville construction site. The vehicle had crashed into a tree after veering down an embankment, and both occupants had been shot multiple times. 3 military operatives who'd moved into the private security sector were identified as suspects in the double murder. Gilad Piled, aged 47, was reported as a former member of the Israeli Defense Forces who owned a company called Spare Tip Security. specializing in responding to extortion demands. Working in conjunction with former U.S. Marines Byron Brockway and Adam Carey, aged 46 and 30 respectively, they'd allegedly kidnapped, then executed Williams and Lanway. Evidence relating to communication and financial transfers revealed that Mour had paid them over $750,000 to do so. He'd even left Speartip a glowing review online under his real name. All 4 men were arrested with FBI involvement in several states, and the case is ongoing. Number 6. Barb Rabba. In June of 2009, a brutal murder sent shockwaves through an Amish community in Apple Creek, Ohio. On June the 2nd, someone had broken into the home shared by Eli Weaver, his 30-year-old wife Barbara, and their 5 children. As Barbara lay in her bed, the intruder shot her through the heart, killing her. Eli, then aged 29, had a solid alibi, as he'd been fishing with friends. He would, however, eventually be proven to have masterminded the murder. Eli had been leading a double life through the online persona Amish Stud, creating profiles in which he posted shirtless photos of himself. A number of women were attracted by his purported lack of experience with the world outside the Amish community and supposed unfamiliarity with technology. Eli had multiple affairs and eventually manipulated one of his mistresses, 39-year-old Barb Rabba, into killing his wife. The woman, a married mother of 3, had been raised Amish and was working as a taxi lady, driving members of the community to places where a horse and buggy couldn't take them. She and Eli had had relations on multiple occasions, including in the barn where the funeral for the man's wife would eventually be held. Investigators found messages exchanged between her and Eli from late May to early June, discussing the various ways in which the killing could be carried out. Poison was proposed by Eli, as was blowing up the house. When Rabba asked about his children while discussing the latter, Eli reportedly replied, "The kids will go to heaven because they're innocent." Investigators would later find hundreds of internet searches made by Rabba regarding poison before the plotting pair eventually settled on a gun. Both were arrested on June the 10th. Rabba admitted to taking a firearm from her husband's gun cabinet and heading to her lover's home, but claimed that she'd only wanted to scare Barbara and shot her by accident. She was sentenced to 20 years to life for aggravated murder, while Eli cut a deal and was handed down a sentence of 15 to life for complicity to commit murder. Number 5. Summer A. In 2020, a 25-year-old woman, only identified as Summer A, drove to Belgium's Weilsbeek municipality alongside her husband, Imran Ayoub, aged 31. They visited a 72-year-old Dutch woman named as Grisha, who'd previously been in an extramarital relationship with Ayoub. They'd been involved for several years, since he was 18 years old and working as her gardener. Grisha, at the time, was married to a wealthy Italian businessman who was often away abroad. Ayoub had enjoyed lavish gifts as a result of the affair with Grisha, including a BMW X6. However, upon marrying Summer in 2017, he assured her that the affair was over. The couple still regularly traveled to the elderly woman's villa to help her with gardening and housework. Summer had accepted that Grisha would always be a part of her husband's life and, by her own admission, felt sorry for her. During a visit to the villa in February, a discussion occurred which revealed that Ayoub and the woman over 40 years his senior was still having an affair. Summer would later tell the authorities, "They turned on me, laughed at me, called me too fat." She was allegedly also told that she had no choice but to accept their relationship. It was at that point that she brandished a handgun and shot Grisha twice. The woman was hit in the head and chest, but remarkably survived and recovered. Summer, who in the aftermath faced 10 years in prison, maintained that she'd found the handgun in her car and placed it in her jacket pocket. She claimed to have been unable to withstand the humiliation and denied having gone to the villa with the premeditated intention of killing Grisha. Number 4. Timothy Brer. On May the 9th of 2020, a member of law enforcement fatally attacked his mistress in the parking lot of the Horns Inn pub in Dorset, England. Police Constable Timothy Brer had been having an affair with 41-year-old Claire Parry, a nurse and mother of 2. Parry's marriage had been breaking apart after her husband, an officer with Dorset Police, had uncovered her illicit relationship with Brer. The latter's wife, a detective on the same force, had been unaware of the affair, which was reported to have been going on for roughly a decade. Parry had allegedly met Brer at the pub to confront him about another one of his flings. At some point, Parry took her lover's cell phone and sent a message to his wife which read, "I am cheating on you." They then got into an altercation inside the car at around 3 p.m, resulted in Parry's neck being broken in 3 places. She suffered devastating brain injuries to which she succumbed the following day. 2 versions contextualizing the fatal incident emerged in the aftermath. Prosecutors would argue that Brer had intentionally applied pressure to Parry's neck with his forearm or the crook of his elbow, underlining that his training would have enabled him to realize she was in distress. Brer maintained that he'd fallen on Parry and accidentally injured her while trying to push her out of his car. He also cut his forearm with a knife, trying to claim that his mistress had stabbed him, but later admitted it to have been a fabrication. Body cam footage taken during his arrest showed him covered in blood and crying in the minutes following the altercation. He was ultimately sentenced to 13.5 years in prison after pleading guilty to manslaughter. Number 3. Craig Hite. On August the 25th of 2008, in the middle of the night, an intruder broke into the home of 59-year-old Philip Hite in Springfield, Georgia. Philip and his son, 32-year-old Carey, were both fatally shot in the head. The intruder also tried to execute Philip's wife, Linda, but she turned away at the last moment and survived, with disfiguring scars after being shot through the left side of her face. The intruder began dousing the house in gasoline, but upon hearing Linda call 911, fled the property. When she was interviewed by the authorities, Carey's wife and the mother of his 3 children, Robin, admitted that she'd been having an affair with his brother, Craig, since April of that year. As the self-professed black sheep of the family, Craig had distanced himself from the successful realty and development business. The avid hunter lived in a mountain cabin, hadn't settled down, and as prosecutors would later argue, secretly wanted the life that his brother had. After Carey and the family uncovered the affair, there was a falling out. Before the murders, Carey had an argument with Robin that led to him spending the night at his parents' house. Craig, then in his late 30s, reportedly felt that his mother, father, and brother stood in the way of him having a future with Robin. 4 months after the killings, he moves into the house that she'd once shared with his brother. After Craig was officially tied to the murders, Robin was reported to have paid for his first lawyer with the money collected from Carey's life insurance. While no physical evidence placed him at the scene, Craig didn't have an alibi, failed a lie detector test, and had bruising on his arms consistent with shotgun recoil, the weapon type used in the attack. 2 years after the horrific crime, Craig was sentenced to 2 life terms plus 85 years. By that point, Robin had turned and testified against him. The woman was rumored and suspected to have been somehow involved in the murders, but was never charged. Number 2. David Clark. On New Year's Eve 2017, David Clark, aged 49, stabbed his wife to death at their home in Stoke Prior, Worcestershire, England. On the night, the couple had been drinking heavily at a friend's home before returning to their residence. Leading up to the killing, 44-year-old Melanie had reportedly teased and taunted David. Her remarks towards his failings as a partner had included often repeated comments about the size of his manhood, which she reportedly knew was a complex of his. The culmination of the fight that had ensued at their home was Melanie admitting to having had an affair with 31-year-old Katie Bastians, an Australian journalist and daughter to one of David's long-time friends. After plunging a kitchen knife through Melanie's chest, David called the authorities and confessed by saying, "I've killed my wife. She did my head in." He was arrested in his bloodied pajamas and begged the officers to kill him upon their arrival. Melanie, who'd been married to David for about 10 years, was survived by 4 children from a previous relationship. David, whose defense alleged that he'd suffered a loss of control, was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 15 years served. Number 1. Ivon Schmidt and Burgett Koning. In 2015, a German man was kidnapped, tortured, and left for dead following a planned attack that had been orchestrated by his ex-wife and his mistress. The victim, only identified as Thomas L., was taken from a Berlin truck stop by 4 unnamed men. He was stripped naked, bound with gaffer tape, and blindfolded prior to being thrown in the back of a refrigerated van. The assailants took him to a remote forest where they brutally beat him up. Thomas was then told to count to 100 before removing his blindfold. The man did so and found that he'd been abandoned, naked and exposed to temperatures of around 35 degrees Fahrenheit. He managed to flag down a passing car and survived, subsequently needing treatment for severe skull and stomach injuries. The attack also left him deeply traumatized, and he required extensive psychiatric counseling in the aftermath. At one point during the assault, he'd been told by the attackers, "Stop bothering Ivon or you'll really get it." The woman that they'd been referring to, as an investigation would later reveal, was the man's ex-wife, 39-year-old Ivon Schmidt. She'd reportedly collaborated with Thomas's mistress, Burgett Koning, aged 37, to plan the attack and hire the henchman that then carried it out. Schmidt admitted to the charges on the first day of her 2017 trial. She claimed to have been abused for 10 years during her marriage to Thomas, and that he'd kept stalking and harassing her after the relationship had ended. She described the attack as a spontaneous decision and didn't identify the henchman she'd hired, claiming to have only met them a short time before at a supermarket parking lot. Koning, reported as the woman with whom Thomas had been having an affair while still married to Schmidt, is believed to have sought revenge after he'd cheated on her as well. How the two women had come to collaborate wasn't specified by investigators. Thanks for watching. Would you rather stop aging physically but only live 20 more years, or live to be 100? Let us know in the comments section below.